Welcome, everyone, and thank you for listening to Sports Doc Talk. I'm Will Sanchez along with Dr. Grant Garcia. Check him out at grantgarciamd.com. Please, we want to hear from you. So reach out to us at sportsdoctalkpodcast@gmail.com. And the reason I'm kind of jumping into the whole Gmail and, having you guys reach out to us, and we love this communication. Before we get into that, Dr. Garcia, welcome to the show. And really, you presented this show because someone came up to you and requested it. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, we also have the www.sportsdoc.com as well. So there's a whole link you can add in what you want to talk to the doctor or Will about, and as well add to your episode. So it's a pretty easy interface. And so Gmail or that interface works out great. We actually have another request, which eventually we're going to get to. But this topic is a good friend of mine, Nina Thatcher. I want to give her a big shout out. But so she is a former Iron man or Iron woman, you could say. And she is an extremely athletic individual, a great person, one of my good friends. And she had heard the podcast and seen some of my posts on LinkedIn, et cetera, and was asking, what can we do as we get older and as we age to keep doing the things that we want to do? And we've talked about this a little bit for professional athletes, but not in the respect of sort of a recreational athlete. And so this brought up a good topic of not only Ironman event, and a lot of her friends are Ironman contenders or qualifiers or finishers, but really, how do we keep athletes going? How do we keep the aging athlete at the level we want them to be? And, there's certain tricks that I've talked about in my surgical aspects, but there's a whole nother gamut of technology, and we're going to try to do our best to get into that today. So,
real quick for our listening audience, if you don't know what this event is, this Ironman event, no disrespect, but you have to be a little bit of a lunatic to do this stuff. It's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then you have a 26.2 mile run. So you're running a marathon, and then you have to complete it within the 17 hours. And there's cutoff times for each leg. So if you've taken too long on the swim or the bike ride, you don't even get to compete on the mile run. So there's all of these different obstacles. I remember I did a AIDS ride event from New York up to Boston, and that first day I rode 120 miles. I stopped about 4 or 5 times to go into the medic tent to get my back checked. I swear, I'm not even joking. And this is young Will Sanchez feeling groovy in training, and I couldn't even move. I got there. It was pitch black dark at our first leg, 120 miles later, and I just felt awful. I was like, I would never do this again. It was a great cause. We're raising money for AIDS, but what I did to my body, I still don't think I've recovered. Dr. Garcia, when you think of something this enormous, what's the first thing that goes through your head?
Pain, lots of pain and perseverance. But you know what? These, my friend, people I know that do this, it's a different mindset. They're different level of sort of both mental and physical. I mean, these are the people that are in the water swimming at 6 a.m. consistently, even as they're in their 20s, 30s, et cetera. They don't give up when they're done in college. Like, they just keep going. Or some people find their new passion. You hear all these stories of somebody that goes and starts doing these in their late 30s to 40s. And being a former athlete, taking care of athletes, taking care of Ironmen, taking care of professional athletes, you name it, there's a mental aspect to it that is unteachable. And you either have it or you don't, or you develop and you don't. But it's really hard to tell someone to have that mindset. But my job and our job, obviously, today is to talk about the things that you can help with. What are the additives to help with this? The standard injuries you have with Ironman athletes, you have the standard sort of tendonitis. You have stress fractures, a lot of times of the feet. And we know a lot of Iron men that have gotten these injuries, plantar fasciitis. And we're going to be hopefully in for a treat next month with my partner, Dr. Anthony Yee. He's going to talk a little bit about some of these lower extremity injuries. But these overuse injuries are really important to understand. And how can we, as physicians or as the population, better understand the treatments available and what is the future? Because really, we're on this cutting edge of regenerative medicine. And I think that's really important for us to understand, like, what's the next step? And obviously be careful because, there's different levels, and the word regenerative is always something you got to be cautious of. But how can we to have this aging athlete, how can we can keep them going? And that's really important.
You know, when we talk about the aging athlete, for you, you know, sports fans out there, we know a couple right off the top of our heads, right? LeBron James at 38 years old is a specimen, right? Tom Brady just retired. We'll figure out if he's going to stay retired, but he's an amazing specimen. But a lot of these athletes that are performing at a high level, that have been in the pros for so long, usually have some kind of routine that's helping them along with that, right? So for LeBron, it's the weight training, the yoga, the Pilates. He has his core workout. This is all of this effort to keep that body fine-tuned and ready, right? Tom Brady talks about, you know, he has a pre-workout pliability. Then he has functional strength conditioning. Then he goes back to pliability. So there's all of these things that we're learning more and more each day, that we need to do certain things to kind of give our body a chance to even perform as you get older. What are some of the things that you think about that as you get older, some of the things that we should be keying in, not only to perform and to, whether it's, you know, play tennis or do anything else and just kind of enjoy life, but to really kind of keep the body going and be functional in your day in and day out activities?
I think you hit on it a few times. I mean, you brought it up with every athlete you just mentioned. It's adaptability. They were doing different things at the end of their careers than they were at the beginning, but they're performing at the same level. They've adapted to their age. They've adapted to their athleticism. They've adapted the level. You know, you can't be 50, you know, you've seen these videos on Instagram or other things, people lifting inappropriately and injuring themselves, and they're like in their young, you know, early teens, late 20s. You know, those guys aren't doing that. You know, they're not just going up and lifting as much weight as possible. They're doing everything in their possibility to try to maximize their athletic ability, but in a different way. You know, we've seen the evolution of fitness, right? It was before, it used to be sort of all out, you know, constantly lift heavy weights, protein, creatine, you name it, to the point now where it's like lean muscle mass, high intensity interval training, plyometrics with a combination of yoga, flexibility, aquatics training. You know, those things are all really important, and constantly keeping your body, you know, you want the things that are in bad shape to get a break, and you want the things that are in good shape to take the brunt and be able to get, be able to get more exercise in those areas. And so I think that's really important for these athletes, and that's really the major thing. And then, you know, I think it's time for us to kind of jump into the next topics. You know, I think we've talked about this before, and you guys can see on our previous podcasts earlier on, you know, the aging athlete, at least from that standpoint, from the professional athletes, important. But what about the recreational athletes? What about the technology coming out? You know, this is really important. I think one of the biggest advances is regenerative medicine. I don't know if you have any comments on this and what you've heard, because it's always good to hear, you know, both sides of the story as to what's sort of the next thing up there, because regenerative medicine is a hot topic and that everyone is talking about it.
Well, I do have a question, because I'm hoping that this is something that's going to help me in the future, because I've had issues in the past, and I knock on wood, it hasn't been as bad the last year, but I was getting this injury about every 2 to 3 to 4 months, and that was with my piriformis. And I went to a doctor, and at the time he was like, "Yeah, man, you've got some arthritis, you've got some injuries, you know, things that piled up over the years. I played this, that, and everything else." And at the time he was like, we got to get to a point where we could get some stem cells and do some things, and, you know, maybe we can help the way you're feeling. Well, I have still not had that treatment yet, you know. So when it comes to something like that, will that be beneficial to me or apply? And if so, what is the timeline that can happen? Because I'm going to make an appointment tomorrow.
So, you know, I think obviously we get into a broad spectrum. So regenerative medicine is the idea, can we find a way with medical technology to regenerate parts of the body or to protect the body?
Yeah.
And from an orthopedic standpoint, it's really important. You know, we're looking for the Holy Grail. We've talked about this before. You know, we are starting to try different stem cells for treatments of, you know, early arthritic changes, but we don't have a lot of data yet. You know, there's fat stem cells, We have stem cells from synovial joints. We have stem cells from amniotic fluid. Again, we're not selling these things right now as an orthopedic group because we're still on the verge of trying to figure them out. They're still in sort of testing phases. Obviously, you got to be careful when people are selling stem cells at, $5,000, $10,000 a pop, telling you it's going to change your life. And so we got to be careful about that. But there are other fields where they're testing it. I mean, multiple sclerosis is a big one. ALS, brain injuries. Yeah. A big one for us as orthopedics is spinal cord injuries. And they're trying to look at the ways that we can find a way to regenerate stem cells to get people back to what they're doing. And can we do that with a combination of other medicines? You've seen these impressive gene splicings options. I just was reading about Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, which is a really horrible disease, or you've heard about sickle cell, and they've spliced genes to get people better again. I mean, they're treating all sorts of genes with this sort of regenerative medicine. Awesome. And looking at aging. I mean, not only are we treating diseases or treating injuries, but can we reduce or turn around aging with these things called telomeres, or sort of the end of your chromosomes that sort of, as the longer you have, then maybe you have more time in this planet or not, and finding ways to reduce ways to have those be damaged. And so, I think we're not there yet, but that idea of regenerative medicine is a very hot topic. And I think that this plus AI in the next 10 years is going to be one of the, the cutting edge fields to treat diseases that are really bad and to treat diseases that are not as bad. No offense to your hip arthritis, but obviously it's very important. We want to treat that, but can we also save people's lives? And I think that we're going to see that this stem cell thing, it may not be what we think it is now. We think of stem cells as like, you take some juice out of your body, mix it around and get the new stem cells, or is it something that we have to develop in the lab, with other techniques? Or is there going to be an epiphany where it's designed by computers and computers figure it out? We're getting there, and we're confident. It's one of the hottest fields. Everyone wants to have this. We all want a magic shot. I have patients all the time that ask for this. And we're getting closer each day, but it's just going to take more time. And unfortunately, Will, there's no appointment for you at this point. As soon as there is, I'll be telling you right away.
Yeah, I mean, because really the piriformis pain, I thought it was in my hip and everything that was going on. And then I had some tests done, and really it's coming from my spine. So I'm getting this arthritis when it gets inflamed in my spine, and it's making me feel like I'm having the pain in the piriformis. And I'm stretching, I'm doing all this stuff, which obviously is beneficial. But when this flares up, I mean, I can't move. I pretty much am using my hands to lift up my thigh to swing my leg around, right? And I'm not the only one. Everyone's kind of going through it. You mentioned sickle cell. My niece and nephew were born with sickle cell, and they've gone through, as little kids, have gone through just the worst. If you know what sickle cell is, it is something that is just, it's really, really difficult to deal with. And my nephew already had to have surgery. Normally they want their surgery at 5 years old, but he was having so many issues that he had to have it early on. And now the younger sister is now showing complications from it as well. So without getting into all the extra details, really, this is something that when you say regenerative medicine and the goals and things like that for everyone, MS, ALS, and everyone else, I mean, this has got to be a big one. And, you're on the clock, brother. You better go figure this out. You go everywhere and you do all these tests. So no pressure, but you're on the clock. Listen, let's move on, because it really is. It's a topic that we can really kind of keep on discussing, because there's so many different aspects of it. We talk about, and I'm wearing it right now. So I got up this morning. I did some stretching. I grabbed some kettlebells. I did some swings, some snatches, things like that. I did a timer, and then I put in my average heart rate. What was the highest heart rate? I have this information now on my wrist. So when we talk about all of these different technologies, these wearable technologies that we've already done a show on, but how it plays a part for these athletes, especially the aging athlete, what is something that they should particularly pay attention to if you have a wearable technology, as far as, maybe keeping themselves healthy or not, trying to avoid injury?
Well, I think, think about back this like 10 years ago. You wanted a heart rate monitor, you strapped it on your chest. You got very little readings.
I hated those things, by the way. Those things were so annoying.
And they're chafed. They're not fun.
No.
So now we have, all of these different monitors, and we'll talk about a couple we didn't talk about before.
Yeah.
But let's go through kind of each aspect of it, right? So you have the simplest thing, which is the Apple Watch. And I hate to say simple, but it's a pretty common piece of technology. You kind of put it on your wrist and that's it. And it can do most of the stuff you want. And they keep advancing in every version. Soon they're just going to tell us what we need to do. They're like, work out harder. They're going to be able to advance all those things.
Great. And
so basically now, yes, precisely. So basically now, as an athlete, you can see, before, when I didn't have an Apple Watch, I had no idea what my high heart rate was. And I was like, used to say as a younger person, why does that matter? But now I know, if I do a HIIT workout and I only get to 130, I'm like, did I really work that hard today? If I go for a run and I get to 160 and I feel pretty good, I'm like, I feel like I got my level at. But if I get to 170 and start not feeling very good, I maybe pushed it too hard. And so I can adjust my workouts based off that level. As someone who really likes, I'm an analytical guy, obviously. We know a little dorky being a doctor, but nonetheless, I find it important for me. And people who, these athletes, like I talked about, these Ironmen, these people that are doing all the time, like they're calculating. They have all their stats. They know what they do. We talked about Verlander before. He knows each speed pitch he has. They have an encyclopedia in their heads for their bodies.
Yeah.
And that helps some of these players, as Verlander is a great example of being at the top of their game for so long. I can tell you right now, I can tell you right now, if you ask LeBron James what his top bench press was, his speed, his vertical, and everything else, and every year he would know without a doubt.
Yeah.
He would have all the numbers in his head because that's what he does. And same with Tom Brady. They have all their physical stats in their head, and they know they go for goals. And it's personal best, not always against everybody else. We know they're competitive, but really it's personal goals that get you to the next level. And these watches and things like that, they can monitor those and get you to that next level or protect you because you're not overdoing it. Because our bodies, as being competitive athletes, that you can hurt yourself. And so I think that's an incredibly important part of the wearable technology. In addition, and I don't want to jump in too much, but into sleep as well. We are so focused on the daytime activities, right? We always want to do more. I am a terrible culprit of this.
Yeah.
And honestly, until about a year and a half ago, I was really bad at sleep. Maybe even 2 years ago, I would just work, barely try to get away without sleep, try to do 2 or 3 rounds of coffee a day. Because I was like, I got to go. I got to make people better. I got to get better. I got to keep working.
Yeah.
And until I got the watch and realized that I was doing a very bad job of sleeping. And when I slept a lot, all of a sudden my memory came back and I felt more alert and I was actually more productive. I remember falling asleep in class as a kid because I was so tired from swimming and working and getting ready for medical school and everything else. And I finally taken it on my own. Thankfully, the life helped a lot with that, with getting back to sleeping. But as an athlete, and as any professional, sleep is essential. And if you're skipping on sleep, you might as well skip your workouts because you're just doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, it's a great point because when you look at all of the training, right? Whether it's, we talked about Brady and LeBron and, even Mark Wahlberg, right? They all talk about, The Rock. I've seen his training. There's like sleep, get up early, work out, eat, supplements, nap, work out, sleep, nap. And so the sleep is an integral part along with it. And I'm terrible with naps and usually I don't have time for them, but it's amazing to me. And I'm a little angry at the fact that some people could just fall asleep really nice and easily and get those naps in. But sleep is a big part of any training. Anyone out there, pick your favorite, person to follow or to, Arnold Schwarzenegger has, a new app now is doing stuff, sleep. Everybody's talking about sleeps. And as we mentioned right now, supplements. As you're getting older, what are some of the key supplements that we should be utilizing because maybe our body is not creating necessarily the same amount, or if we're staying active, we need to kind of help the body along with adding some supplements?
So, the biggest one is omega-3, fatty acids. A lot of times, like as us, thankfully in Seattle, we have a lot of fish, salmon especially.
Yeah.
So that helps to sort of improve inflammation of the joints, improve joint health in general. And so that's a really important supplement. You just got to be careful though. At the same point, supplements are a great way to add more balance to you. You can have, vegetable supplementation. You can have other supplementation, vitamin B12, vitamin C, etc. But you also can be careful because it's also a huge market and it's not really FDA regulated, similar to other things we've seen. And so supplementation is good, but people sometimes think, okay, so the recommended daily value is this. So if I have 2 times more, I'll be 2 times better.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work like that.
Gotcha.
And the one other thing that's really good, especially for us in the Pacific Northwest, is vitamin D. We are very deficient. I'm a guy that likes the sun if I can take advantage of it. And over the last few years, I've had a couple values that have been low vitamin D despite being of Latin heritage. And so it was surprising to me to see vitamin D levels, and talking to, even my primary care doctor, they're like, this is extremely common. And the people in the Pacific Northwest and upper northern regions tend to have low vitamin D levels. And especially for my patients, I'm a bone health kind of guy because I see breaks and fractures all the time. A lady in her 50s falls, breaks her wrist, breaks her shoulder. That's not normal. I mean, it seems normal to us, but it's not. It shouldn't happen. It's osteoporosis or osteopenia. Yeah. And so bone health is essential. So vitamin D, calcium is good. And it's not just women, it's men too. We're not above the osteopenia, osteoporosis, and no one wants a fracture. And so it's important for us to make sure we take care of our bodies. And extreme athletes can be at other risks as well. And so you want to make sure you have right supplementation if you're going to be doing it. If you're doing a 2.4 mile swim and a 112 mile bike ride and a 26 mile marathon, you better be properly hydrated. It's not just water. Yeah. We could have the joke of Gatorade, but again, it's all of those things are essential for supplementation. You have to supplement in what you're coming out. You can't also go for being perfectly fit and just, eat salad all day either. You have to have a good combination of things.
Yeah, as mentioned, I was going to bring it up as far as, the role electrolytes plays, especially if you're training and competing. And so I think to oversimplify it is to pretty much be aware of what you're putting out so you can recognize what you need to add back in, right? I mean, I think that's the easiest, most simplest way to kind of put it. Dean Karnazes, I'm pretty sure you know who this guy is. He's an ultramarathon runner. He competed in the largest nonstop run by a human being back in 2005. He ran 350 miles nonstop. He's not human, all right? He's just not. So it took him 80 hours, almost 81 hours, and he's 60 years old. To this day, he's averaging about 70 to 120 miles a week. And he talked about 3 things. One, he talked about overbuilt running shoes, cross training, and really the one that stands out to me, and we talk about it, we recognize it, but it's something that we really need to be aware is, he says, no sitting allowed. It just weakens the posture. When it comes to athletes and being active, what does the role of sitting too long or sitting too much can play on the body? And maybe that's something that you've seen with patients coming in, how it affects them.
Sitting's atrocious. It's good, bad for your back. It's, I've had back issues before, and I realized I'm thankful in my job that I rarely am allowed to sit. Yeah. So I got lucky, but I'm also tired at the end of the day because you're constantly standing. But, sitting is just not good for your body. And unfortunately, in a tech-driven market and, with our day and age of being on computers, we all are sitting on the couch and watching shows. Yep. But really, being active, getting up and about, the kids help because obviously they make you stand all the time. There's no sitting allowed when you have children. But, the stand, there's a reason your watch calculates how often you stand.
Yeah.
It's a really important function. And I think he's also simplifying in the sense that, don't sit around and let life go by. Guys, there's a reason he looks like the way he does, and there's a reason he's able to continue to train. Yeah. And he's very lucky. He genetically has things that can do that. We talked about this before. Not everything is just training. Not everything is effort. There's a lot of genetics involved. If everyone trained like LeBron James, most of them wouldn't be. Almost none of them would be LeBron James.
I still can't dunk. Brady. I still can't dunk, even if I train like LeBron. I know. So go. What your point is? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think really what the important part of this is that if you want to be an active person and you want to be active, you just got to go. You got to do it. You got to think about it. And at first it's going to be hard. If you're used to sitting 12 hours a day and you go to 8 hours a day, we've seen this big push for stand-up desks. At my office, we can't sit down because everything's a podium, so we're standing constantly. Yeah. I find myself leaning a couple times because I get a little bit tired of standing and running around between patients. My staff finds it funny because I run between different office doors and everything else, and I'm constantly moving. But, it makes me feel better at the end of the day. You find you're sitting, you think you're resting, but it's actually worse for your body. And it slows down your metabolism and all these different things. So I think the hardest part, is the combination of activity diet, exercise, rest, etc. And people don't understand how that balance works. You have people that are on one end, they're all diet, right? Diet this, diet that. You've seen all that. And that's really important.
Yeah.
But that's not, it's almost sort of I'd say a pyramid or a square. And if you only focus on one little corner, you're not going to be successful. These high level athletes, they're not just eating the best foods possible all the time only. They're focused on a lot of things, the sleep aspect, the training aspect, and then the recovery aspect. And all of these are essential. And I don't want to jump back to an old topic, but the one thing I forgot to mention with the wearable technology in terms of sort of monitoring your body is those new glucose monitors. Have you seen those?
No.
So basically they're really simple and anybody can have them. And you basically put on the side. It used to be for diabetics patients, but basically you can just monitor your glucose with your phone. And it's another way that some of our athletes are using it for training, or with people who do intermittent fasting, you can identify your glucose levels. And that's also part of your regimen, is to see what your glucose levels are like, because you can know more information. We don't have that ability yet until this thing came out, but this new technology is pretty impressive. It's pretty painless, and it just sits on the side of your arm. You may have seen people with these little nubs on the side of their arm, and you just scan your phone and it tells you what your glucose levels are and other levels as well.
For those that don't know why it's important, explain, please.
So glucose is the initial sugar. There's other levels of sugars, and I don't want to go into sort of the overall details of the way our body processes energy. But glucose is essential. And if your glucose, you don't want to have glucose levels can come from a lot of things, but fruits and vegetables, or mainly fruits, simple sugars are really important. And you don't want to obviously have glucose from, candy and those things. It's a different level of, it's not the same type of stuff, the high fructose corn syrup, et cetera. But you don't want to have your glucose levels get low, because that's when you start to get hungry, you get shaky, you don't feel as well. And so I think that understanding and monitoring this, you've heard The Rock, he talks about having 5 or 6 meals a day. That's like really the way to go, is you're just never really that hungry. And so you're not engorging yourself. We're so used to this. There's been an article I heard that they talked about the 3-meal regimen was invented basically by Americans, this sort of these 3 different things we have to have all the time, or 3 meals, dessert and espresso, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
But really it's this keeping your glucose levels at a moderate thing. I find if during the day I just have a little snack here or there, it can make it so you eat less during the day. And that's another good opportunity. And obviously if you're exercising, you get a massive glucose low from your exercise. You don't want to, skip a meal then and then have an issue later on. I mean, the way your body metabolizes fat, I think it's always hard for people to understand. But understanding that it's not just about the diet, it's about everything, and it's all essential. And I think the problem is our minds can only process so much. So if we're hyper focused on one of those things I call the square, we're missing on the other things. You have to be kind of cognizant, and you got to sacrifice. Okay, I'm not going to be perfect on diet now. The Rock always talks about cheat days. It's okay to let yourself have some not so great foods every once in a while, but it's okay to not get perfect sleep all the time. But you just don't want to make it a habit.
Yeah, so I guess The Rock was watching me yesterday as I had a nice margarita slice of pizza. So don't tell anyone, but yeah, it was delicious. But going back to your point, I had a slice of pizza. I didn't have 3 or 4, which is easy to do. So in moderation. Real quick, I feel like we could do 2 hours on this thing. So I'm just trying to move it along a little bit. For anyone that's trying to say, hey, I've been out of shape, I kind of want to get back in shape. I know personally I can't do it. And so I'm going to go somewhere, try to get some training, go to a facility. I'm not sure. There's a million different ones. Everyone's saying the same thing. Is there one thing, maybe 2 things to focus on if you're going to go to a place to try to, get back in shape? That you should recognize, say, if they do this, or if this is a part of their training, then that's a good sign for you to go there. Is there anything that stands out for you?
Well, I think you got to go in, and I hate to jump back to that, but I think you got to go in with the regimen of, I'm going to do my best and not hurt myself, right? Because if you're out of shape, we saw this so many times during the pandemic. People didn't work out at a gym for 2 months, 2 years, and they come back and they get hurt, and then I see them in the office. So going in, if you've been out of shape, is to focus on the things that you can do well first, making sure you're stretching, you're doing all your adequate thing. That's not going to burn fat, but that's going to protect you from getting injured. Because as soon as you get injured, you're back to where you were.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's really people don't understand is I think if you go to these gyms, you get a lot of people lifting weights, and the people that are lifting the weights are usually people that look like they lift like a lot of weights, right? And then you see the people on the cardio machines trying to burn fat. But what people don't understand is that actually weightlifting is more fat burning than cardio.
Yeah.
And so really the focus should be on weights, especially people as they're trying to gain muscle mass. But it's cross training. And that's what you had mentioned before with talking about Dean. Cross training is essential. And so I do this workout all the time. I do, HIIT exercises, but then I'll mix it up and do some cardio and really focus on weights to try to keep the tone and try to burn that fat because that extra effort you're doing. So don't skip on different areas in the gym or with a trainer. And you'll see a lot of the trainers focus mostly on the weights. And the reason being is that's where they can give you the most value. It's really not helpful to have someone tell you to run on the treadmill. That doesn't really add a lot of skill set. But also mix up the machines. There's so many different options. And so just constantly keep the body guessing. I know that's kind of some jokes they have running and keep the body guessing, but it really is essential. And that's the same thing we're talking about with all these athletes. They're constantly keeping their body guessing.
Yeah.
So when one part gets tired, they focus on something else.
And just to put it out there, and everybody kind of knows this, but the reality is it doesn't matter when you start, right? So if you're 30, 40, 50, I've worked at a local gym here with kettlebell training, and I've seen people come in 60, 70s, and even 80. And, and they move a little bit of weight, and they're doing, weight training, doing different things. And if you watch them for 6 months, you watch them for a year, they're moving around, and it's beautiful to see, and it's inspiring. And the reason I say it is just like, don't get stuck like this is what I've been doing. It doesn't matter. Start today, get out, go for a little walk, or whatever the case may be. Anyway, that's my spiel there. Anything coming up as far as, there's so much, right? Whether it's advancing cartilage, and we've talked about internal brace and things like that. Is there anything out there out of the million things that we can discuss that stands out for you, especially with the aging athlete?
So I think from an orthopedic standpoint, we talked a lot about the things that do prevent injury, but it's going to happen. And sometimes it unfortunately happens when you don't want it to, is to understand that there are solutions. And like we said before, get other opinions. This is the most common area I see. As we get to these arthritis or early arthritis issues, there are less and less physicians, even orthopedic surgeons, that feel comfortable with cartilage restoration or getting athletes back at that age. The number of patients are surprised when I tell them, I have a surgery that I'm going to do for you, and I'm not going to restrict you afterwards, because my number one goal is not to replace the joint. My number one goal is to save the joint. And so you need to make sure you shop around for the right people. Again, it's not always the right solution for everyone, but knowing that there are advances out there, you should be given multiple options as you're younger, and things that we're willing to do are more sort of risque or sort of more to cutting edge as you're younger, because you're just not eligible for a knee replacement, especially when you're below 50, 55. So there's other things that we do now. I mean, I said before, I was at a big national meeting teaching newer techniques to save the ACL. We didn't do this a few years ago. We had no technology for it. People, half the surgeons there that were learning about this were blown away that we have this technology. Wow. And so, I just basically I did a course teaching about cartilage restoration and how we can save the knee. And so there's all these things that I can do as a surgeon, and there's other surgeons out there as well that have these opportunities. You just need to know this. And the goal of my procedures, it's always patients always go, well, I'm not in that much pain normally. Okay, that's fine. But can you do the sports that you want to do? And they say, no, I'm unhappy. And that's why they're in the office. And I tell them, and Will, you probably heard me say this before, I do not do surgeries for the most part so you can just walk down the hallway. Yeah. That's not why you'd spend all the time doing this. This is so you can get back to the activities you want to do. Does that mean you're going to get back every time? No. But does that mean that we're going to do our best and we've had good results? Yes. I mean, you've seen it on the website. You've heard about these testimonials. Patients do well if done for the right reason, but it's important for the patients to understand that there are solutions and there are ways we can avoid knee replacement with injections, cartilage restoration, and there is cutting edge. I mean, even the next year, I'm going to add 3 more cartilage options probably to my repertoire with the newer technology coming out. So, there's just so many different things. And this is really the future of, like, you heard it, can we prevent these joints from happening? And if we can't, can we get them back with surgical procedures that are less invasive or faster recovery? You've heard about the Reblis, which we're going to talk about next week on a webinar, while we take these complex knee patients and get them back for rehab. We are hitting this from all angles: the pre, the during, the post, the recovery, the rehab, the long-term monitoring with these wearable technologies, you name it. So our goal is to continue to keep these athletes going. And if something happens to you, come right back. We'll figure out a solution. That's the key.
That is the key, and that's perfect. Hey, listen to your body, right? Hey, listen to your body. Get out there. Keep moving. Don't be afraid of getting injured. Obviously be safe and smart, but it'll be beneficial for you in the long run to move, to whether it's to hinge, to squat, to just get out of bed, right? If you don't move, as you get older, those things are going to become more difficult. Dr. Garcia, I think we're going to wrap it up. What do you think?
I think we talk all night on this, but it's probably going to be tiring for our listeners to listen for the next 2 hours. So here's what I'll tell everybody. If you want any of these topics in more depth, please reach out to us on the Gmail, Sports Doc Talk Podcast at gmail.com, or head out the website. It's a really great website at www.sportsdoctalk.com. There's a great way to fill out a referral and ask about what type of episodes you want, or if you want more information, we're happy to jump on this. And then listen to different websites and learn about this, because there's lots of information.
I love it. And, you're so close to wrapping up the show, but in honor of the Kraken making the playoffs and because of the topic, all right, who was the oldest hockey player to play in the NHL?
Oh my gosh. I don't even think I can get close.
Gordie Howe.
Not even close.
He played till 52 years old, one of the greatest hockey players to ever play for the Detroit Red Wings, and he also played with the Hartford Whalers. He played 26 seasons. So if he could go out there and play,
52 years old, that's amazing.
If he could play in the NHL until from 46 to 1980, if he could play that entire time, where it was, he didn't even have a helmet when he started and got hit and took the punishment and kept his body in shape and did what he did, you could go out there. So that was my little trivia honoring our hockey playoffs and also our aging show. Dr. Garcia, thank you for playing. I appreciate it. It's good to talk to you. Check him out, GrantGarciaMD.com. He's our orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine specialist. Good job, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, we'd like to thank everyone out there listening. We appreciate it. Keep the questions, the comments, and the suggestions coming in. Thank you very much.